Admiral Keiko Yamada stood on the observation deck of Terran Command Station, staring at the holographic display that filled the entire wall. The blue and green lights represented human star systems, 47 small dots clustered together like a tiny island in an ocean of darkness. Beyond them, spreading across the galaxy like a massive red stain, was the Calvaxian Galactic Empire. 10,000 worlds, millions of ships, trillions of beings all bowing to one throne. And now they wanted humanity to bow too. The communication officer's voice broke the silence. Admiral, incoming transmission from the Calvaxian fleet. They're requesting a response to their terms. Yamada turned away from the window. Her dark eyes were calm, but everyone on the bridge could feel the tension in the air. She had read the Calvaxian terms 3 times already. Each time they made her angrier. The Empire called it a generous offer of protection. They would allow humans to keep their worlds, their culture, even their government. All humanity had to do was accept Calvaxian authority, pay tribute, and provide ships and soldiers whenever the Empire demanded them. It was slavery wrapped in polite words. "Open a channel," Yamada said quietly. "Let me speak to their commander directly." The holographic display shifted, and suddenly she was looking at Fleet Master Genvar, a Calvaxian warrior who stood nearly 8 feet tall. His scaled skin was deep purple, and his 4 eyes studied her with what looked like amusement. Behind him, Yamada could see the bridge of his flagship, full of officers who barely glanced at the human on their screen. "Admiral Yamada," Genvar said, his voice translated by the computer into perfect English. "I trust you have considered our Emperor's generous terms. Your species is young, barely 300 years in space. The Empire has existed for 50,000 years. We know how the galaxy works. You do not. Accept our protection and your people will prosper." Yamada clasped her hands behind her back. "I have considered your terms, Fleet Master, and I have a response prepared." Genvar's expression shifted slightly. Perhaps he expected gratitude or fear. "Excellent. When will your government officially accept?" "We won't," Yamada said simply. "The Terran Confederacy rejects your offer entirely. We will not become vassals of the Calvaxian Empire. Not now, not ever." For a moment there was complete silence on the Calvaxian bridge. Then several officers started talking at once, their voices rising in what sounded like confusion. Genvar held up one clawed hand and they fell silent. "Admiral, perhaps you misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. The Empire does not make offers twice. You accept or what?" Yamada interrupted. Her voice was still calm, but now there was steel in it. "You invade? You try to take our worlds by force? Let me make something very clear, Fleet Master. You see 47 human star systems on your maps. What you don't see is what we've built in those systems over the past 300 years. You don't see our defenses. You don't see our weapons. You don't see what we're capable of." Genvar's mouth opened slightly, showing rows of sharp teeth. It might have been a smile. "We have 10,000 worlds, human. We have conquered species far older and more advanced than yours. What could you possibly have that would concern the Empire?" Yamada leaned forward slightly. "Cross our border and find out. But I'm giving you fair warning right now. If you send ships into Terran space without permission, you will regret it. Not some of you, all of you." The Calvaxian officers on the bridge were no longer amused. Some looked angry. Others looked shocked that anyone would dare speak to the Empire this way. Genvar's 4 eyes narrowed. "You dare threaten the Empire? Your entire species could fit on a few of our worlds. You have no allies, no ancient technology. Nothing but primitive worlds barely worth conquering. And yet you stand there and make threats?" "Not threats," Yamada corrected. "A warning. There's a difference. We're telling you now, clearly and directly, that the Terran border is not to be crossed. If you respect that border, there will be no conflict between our peoples. But if you cross it..." She paused, making sure every word was clear. "Then you're choosing war. And I promise you, Fleet Master, humanity knows war better than you can possibly imagine." Genvar was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was colder now. "The Emperor will hear of this insult. He will not be pleased." "Good," Yamada said. "Make sure he understands our position. The Terran Confederacy is not interested in being part of your empire. We will remain independent, and our border will be respected." The transmission ended abruptly. The holographic display returned to showing the star map. Yamada stared at it for a moment, then turned to her command staff. Every officer was watching her, waiting. "They'll come," she said quietly. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But they'll come. The Empire has never been told no before. They won't accept it." Her second-in-command, Commander Park, stepped forward. "Should we move to full combat readiness?" "We've been at full combat readiness for 6 months," Yamada replied. "Ever since we detected their scout ships approaching our space. What I want now is confirmation that all border systems are prepared, every defense platform active, every ship in position, every civilian evacuation plan ready to execute." Park nodded and began giving orders. The bridge became busy with activity as officers coordinated with fleet elements across dozens of star systems. Yamada walked back to the observation window. Somewhere out there, beyond the comfortable lights of human space, the Calvaxian Empire was deciding what to do about the upstart species that had dared to refuse them. She knew how empires thought. She had studied human history extensively. Rome, China, Britain, the corporate wars of the 22nd century. Every empire believed itself invincible right up until the moment it met something it couldn't conquer. The Calvaxians had ruled for 50,000 years. In that time, they had absorbed hundreds of species. Some had resisted for a while, but all had eventually surrendered. The Empire probably couldn't even imagine a different outcome. But humans were different. Yamada knew this in her bones. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting nature on a deadly planet that tried to kill them in 1,000 ways, fighting each other in wars that spanned continents and centuries, fighting to survive every plague, famine, and disaster that could have ended them. They had taken their violent, competitive nature to the stars and built something new, but the core remained. Humans knew how to fight, and more importantly, humans knew how to win against impossible odds. They were persistent, adaptable, creative in ways that species born to galactic empires could never understand. And they had spent the last 100 years preparing for exactly this moment. The Calvaxians didn't know it yet, but they had just made the biggest mistake in their 50,000-year history. "Admiral," Park said, pulling Yamada from her thoughts. "Message from the Council. They're asking if diplomacy is still possible." Yamada almost smiled. "Politicians always thought there was another way, another compromise. Tell them diplomacy ended the moment the Empire demanded our surrender. Now we wait to see if they're smart enough to accept our answer, or foolish enough to test it." 3 days later, Terran long-range sensors detected a Calvaxian fleet gathering at their border. 200 ships. A demonstration force meant to intimidate the humans into reconsidering their answer. Yamada gave one simple order: let them come. Don't fire until they cross the border. And when they do, make sure none of them leave to report what happened. The trap was set. Humanity's first real test against a galactic power was about to begin, and the Calvaxians had no idea what they were walking into. Fleet Commander Draketh sat in his command chair aboard the warship Endless Victory, watching the viewing screen with growing unease. The Calvaxian fleet had crossed into human space 30 minutes ago. 200 of the Empire's finest warships, moving in perfect formation toward the human colony world of Epsilon Eridani III. There had been no response from the humans. No desperate pleas for mercy. No last-minute offers to negotiate. Just silence. "Commander," his sensor officer said, "I'm detecting multiple objects throughout the system. Thousands of them." Draketh leaned forward. "What kind of objects? Warships?" "Negative, sir. They appear to be satellites or possibly debris. They're too small to be ships. Most are less than 5 meters across." "Could they be weapons platforms?" Draketh asked. He remembered the human admiral's warning, though Fleetmaster Genvar had dismissed it as empty bluster. The sensor officer checked his displays again. "Unknown, sir. They're not showing any active weapons signatures. No power spikes. They're floating." Draketh looked at the tactical display. The tiny objects were everywhere, scattered throughout the system like seeds in a field. It didn't look like any defensive formation he'd ever seen. Usually species put their defenses around their planets or in obvious choke points, but these things were spread out seemingly at random. "Maintain course," Draketh ordered, though his instincts were screaming at him that something was wrong. "Increase scan intensity. I want to know what those objects are." The fleet continued forward. The human colony world was still 3 hours away at their current speed. Draketh had expected human ships to intercept them by now, or at least some kind of communication demanding they leave. But there was nothing. Just silence in those strange floating objects. "Sir, we're receiving new orders from Fleet Master Genvar," the communications officer announced. "We're to continue to the planet and establish orbital superiority. If the humans resist, we're authorized to neutralize their planetary defenses." Draketh acknowledged the order, but his unease was growing. Something about this felt like a trap. But what could the humans possibly do? They were outnumbered. They had no allies. And the Calvaxian Empire had crushed species far more advanced than humanity. 2 hours passed. The fleet drew closer to the planet. The strange objects remained inactive. Then everything changed. Without any warning, without any signal or power surge that the sensors could detect, the objects activated. All of them. Thousands of small platforms suddenly lit up on the tactical display, moving with impossible speed and precision. "Evasive action," Draketh shouted, but it was already too late. The objects weren't satellites. They were weapons. Autonomous platforms that had been waiting in complete silence, invisible to Calvaxian sensors until the exact moment they chose to activate. And now they were moving, accelerating at speeds that should have torn them apart. The first wave hit the Endless Victory's shields like hammers. Draketh was thrown from his chair as the ship shuddered. Alarms screamed throughout the bridge. On the tactical display, he could see other ships in the fleet taking hits. Some were losing shields. Some were losing engines. What are they firing? Draketh demanded, pulling himself back to his chair. "Kinetic projectiles," the weapons officer reported, his voice shaking. "Solid metal slugs accelerated to near light speed. And something else, the sensors can't identify it. Some kind of directed energy weapon that's phasing through our shields. Return fire. Target those platforms." The Calvaxian ships began firing back, their powerful plasma cannons lighting up the darkness of space. They hit several of the human platforms, destroying them in bright explosions. But for every platform they destroyed, 10 more seemed to appear. And the platforms were moving in ways that defied logic, making impossible turns, appearing and disappearing as if they could jump short distances through space itself. "Sir, the Radiant Sword has lost all power. The glorious dawn is venting atmosphere. We're losing ships." Draketh watched in horror as the tactical display showed his fleet being torn apart. Ships that had served the Empire for centuries were dying in seconds, and they couldn't even see where all the attacks were coming from. "Fall back," he ordered. "All ships retreat to the border." But it was already too late for most of them. The human weapons were everywhere, hitting from every direction. Some seemed to fire from different dimensions, their projectiles appearing inside Calvaxian ships without ever crossing the distance between. Others released swarms of smaller drones that latched onto ships and began cutting through their hulls with focused energy beams. The Endless Victory took another hit, this one catastrophic. The main reactor went critical. Draketh had just enough time to order the crew to the escape pods before the entire engineering section exploded. He found himself floating in space in an emergency pod, watching his ship die. Around him, the remains of the Calvaxian fleet were scattered like broken toys. Some ships were trying to retreat. Most weren't moving at all. The entire battle had lasted 47 seconds. From first shot to final explosion, less than a minute had passed. And 200 Calvaxian warships had been reduced to wreckage and escape pods. Draketh's pod was picked up by one of the 3 ships that managed to escape. The captain was young, barely out of the military academy, and his face was pale with shock. "Get us out of here," Draketh ordered. "Maximum speed. And send a message to Fleet Master Genvar. Tell him..." He paused, trying to find words for what he'd just witnessed. "Tell him the humans weren't bluffing. Tell him we need to reconsider this entire campaign." The young captain nodded and turned to give orders. Draketh strapped himself into a seat and closed his eyes. But all he could see was that tactical display. The way the human weapons had moved. The precision. The deadly efficiency. This wasn't the defense of a primitive species. This was something else entirely. Light years away in Terran Command Station, Admiral Yamada watched the same battle on her own displays. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her face showing no emotion as Calvaxian ships died on the screen. All platforms performed within expected parameters, Commander Park reported. Total human casualties 0. Calvaxian fleet strength reduced by 98.5%. "Any survivors?" Yamada asked. 3 ships escaped. Multiple escape pods recovered by automated rescue drones. "We're holding the survivors in a secure facility on Epsilon Eridani 3. Yamada nodded slowly. Good, treat them well. Give them medical care and return them to the Empire when they ask for them. And make sure they understand exactly what happened. I want them to tell their leaders the truth. Yes, Admiral. Should we expect retaliation? Yamada looked at the star map, at the massive red stain of the Calvaxian Empire spreading across the galaxy. Oh yes, they'll retaliate. The Empire can't afford to look weak. They'll send more ships, probably a much larger fleet. But first, there will be a period of confusion while they try to understand what just happened. She turned to face her staff. Every officer was watching her with a mixture of pride and worry. They had just won a victory, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. The Calvaxians don't understand humans yet, Yamada continued. They think we're like every other species they've conquered. They think that if they hit us hard enough, we'll surrender. But they're wrong. We spent 300 years preparing for this exact moment. We knew someday we'd have to face a galactic empire, and we made sure that when that day came, we'd be ready. What do we do now? Park asked. Yamada looked back at the star map. Now we wait. We let them make the next move, and we hope they're smart enough to accept that their demonstration failed. But if they're not, she paused and her voice became harder. If they're not, then we show them what humanity really looks like when we stop holding back. In the medical facility on Epsilon Eridani 3, Draketh lay in a bed designed for Calvaxian physiology, staring at the ceiling. Human doctors had treated his injuries with surprising skill and care. They had given him food and water. They had even offered him entertainment to pass the time until the Empire sent someone to retrieve him. But Draketh couldn't stop thinking about the battle. 47 seconds. That was all it had taken for humanity to destroy a fleet that should have been invincible. And the worst part was that it had seemed almost easy for them. Like they had been prepared for exactly this situation. A human soldier entered the room. She was young, maybe in her 20s, with dark skin and kind eyes. She set a tray of food beside his bed. How are you feeling, Commander? She asked in perfect Calvaxian. How do you think? Draketh replied. I just watched my entire fleet die. The soldier nodded sympathetically. War is terrible. We know this better than most species. We've been fighting wars for our entire history. Then you understand what will happen next, Draketh said. The Empire will send more ships. They'll send an armada so large that even your weapons can't stop it. The soldier smiled sadly. Maybe, but maybe they should ask themselves why a species as young as ours invested so heavily in weapons technology. Maybe they should wonder what we know that they don't. She left before Draketh could respond, but her words stayed with him, echoing in his mind long after she was gone. Emperor Jaltoth stood before the assembled war council in the Grand Palace on the Calvaxian homeworld. His four eyes blazed with anger as he listened to Fleetmaster Genvar's report about the disaster at Epsilon Eridani. Around the circular chamber, military commanders and noble advisors sat in uncomfortable silence. 200 ships, the Emperor said slowly, his voice echoing off the marble walls. 200 ships destroyed in less than a minute by humans, by a species that has been in space for barely 3 centuries. My Emperor, Genvar began, but Jaltoth raised one hand, silencing him. I have ruled this empire for 800 years. In that time, we have absorbed 47 species into our domain. Some resisted, some fought back, but all eventually surrendered because they understood the truth. The Calvaxian Empire is eternal. We cannot be defeated. He paused, his eyes sweeping across the council. And yet you tell me that these humans destroyed an entire fleet with automated weapons platforms? That our ships couldn't even fight back? The humans have technology we don't understand, my Emperor, Genvar said carefully. Their weapons systems are far more advanced than our intelligence suggested. Then we will use more ships. Jaltoth's voice boomed through the chamber. We will assemble an armada so vast that no defensive network can stop it. 2,000 warships. We will hit them from multiple directions simultaneously. We will crush their colonies and force them to surrender. An elderly Calvaxian named Vestara, the Empire's chief scholar, rose from her seat. My Emperor, if I may speak. Jaltoth gestured for her to continue. I have been studying the humans since they first appeared in our intelligence reports, Vestara said. There are patterns in their history that concern me. They evolved on a death world, a planet so hostile that 98% of all species that ever lived there went extinct. The humans survived by becoming endurance hunters, by learning to outlast and outsmart every predator. And once they developed intelligence, they turned their competitive nature on each other. What is your point, scholar? The Emperor asked impatiently. My point is that humans spent 10,000 years in almost constant warfare. They developed weapon after weapon, strategy after strategy, all while fighting each other. By the time they reached space, they had perfected the art of war in ways most species never need to, and they brought that knowledge with them to the stars. Are you suggesting we should fear them? Shenvar asked incredulously. I'm suggesting we should understand them before we commit more resources, Vestara replied. The humans who refused our terms, the ones who built those weapons platforms, they're not like other species. They're showing us restraint, not weakness. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. You think they're holding back? I know they are. Every war in human history shows the same pattern. They start with limited responses, hoping diplomacy will work. But when pushed too far, they escalate beyond all reason. They have a concept they call total war, the complete mobilization of every resource to destroy an enemy. If we push them to that point— Enough! Sheltoth's voice cracked like thunder. The Calvaxian Empire does not back down from primitives. We will assemble the Armada and we will crush these humans. That is my final decision. 3 weeks later, the Armada assembled at multiple staging points along the Terran border, 2,000 warships, representing the largest military force the Empire had gathered in over a century. Fleetmaster Genvar stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and gave the order to advance. The Armada crossed the border at 5 different points simultaneously. This time there would be no slow approach, no time for the humans to prepare their automated defenses. The Calvaxian ships moved at maximum speed, their shields at full power, their weapons ready, but the humans were already moving. Terran Command had seen the Armada gathering. They knew it was coming, and they had prepared accordingly. The first wave of human ships appeared out of nowhere, dropping out of faster-than-light travel directly in front of the Calvaxian advance. They weren't the automated platforms from before. These were actual warships crewed by humans, and they were different from anything the Calvaxians had fought before. The human ships were smaller than Calvaxian warships, sleeker and faster. And they didn't fight the way other species fought. Instead of forming battle lines and exchanging fire, they hit and ran, appearing and disappearing in bursts of light. They're using combat-capable FTL drives. The sensor officer on Genvar's ship shouted. They can jump in and out of faster-than-light travel in combat. That shouldn't be possible, but it was possible. The humans had spent decades developing the technology, perfecting it, making it reliable. Now their ships were ghosts, striking from impossible angles and vanishing before the Calvaxians could respond. And that wasn't all. Human ships carried weapons that phased through shields, that fired from multiple dimensions, that seemed to predict where Calvaxian ships would be before they got there. It was like fighting an enemy that could see the future. Fall back to defensive formation, Genvar ordered. Concentrate fire on— His order was cut off as something massive appeared on the sensors. A human ship, larger than anything they'd seen before. It was broadcasting a message on all frequencies. This is the TCS Indomitable to all Calvaxian forces. You are in violation of Terran space. Leave immediately or we will destroy you. Genvar stared at the massive human ship. It was easily twice the size of his flagship. Return fire. All ships target that vessel. A dozen Calvaxian ships fired at once, their plasma cannons unleashing enough energy to vaporize a moon. But the human ship's shields absorbed every shot without even flickering. Then it fired back. The Indomitable's main weapon was unlike anything in the Calvaxian arsenal. A beam of pure energy that didn't just pierce shields, it erased them. 3 Calvaxian warships simply ceased to exist, torn apart at the molecular level. Across all 5 invasion points, the same scene was playing out. Human ships attacking from every direction, human weapons cutting through Calvaxian defenses like they were paper, and human tactics that seemed to anticipate every move the Empire made. On Terran Command Station, Admiral Yamada watched the battle unfold across multiple displays. Her expression was grim. They're still pushing forward, Commander Park reported. Even after losing 600 ships, they're still trying to reach our colonies. Then we move to Phase 2, Yamada said. Authorization code Yamada Alpha 77 Delta. Begin deep strike operations. Yes, Admiral. Within minutes, human strike teams launched from hidden bases throughout the border region. These weren't fleets. These were small, fast ships crewed by Special Forces soldiers. And their targets weren't the Calvaxian armada. They were the supply lines deep in Empire territory. Corporal Diego Martinez sat in the cramped cockpit of an assault shuttle, checking his weapon for the 5th time. Around him, 20 other Marines did the same. They had trained for this mission for 2 years. Now it was real. 2 minutes to drop point, the pilot announced. Target is a Calvaxian logistics station in the Veltara system. Intelligence says it's lightly defended. In and out, no heroics. Martinez nodded, though his heart was pounding. The shuttle was moving through Empire space using stealth systems that made them almost invisible. Almost. If the Calvaxians detected them, they'd be dead in seconds. The shuttle shook as it entered atmosphere. Through the window, Martinez could see the logistics station below, a massive complex of warehouses and fuel depots. Ships were coming and going, supplying the armada at the front lines. Go, 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 the sergeant shouted. Martinez jumped from the shuttle, his powered armor absorbing the impact as he hit the ground running. The other Marines spread out, moving with practiced precision toward their objectives. Calvaxian guards appeared, firing energy weapons. Martinez's armor absorbed the hits and he fired back, his rifle using smart bullets that adjusted their trajectory mid-flight to hit targets behind cover. The mission took 12 minutes. The Marines planted explosive charges throughout the complex, downloaded data from the station's computers, and left a message on every display screen. You cannot win a war against a species that perfected warfare before reaching the stars. Turn back now. They were back on the shuttle and accelerating into space before the first explosion. Martinez watched through the rear camera as the entire logistics station went up in a fireball that could be seen from orbit. Good work, Marines, the pilot said, but that was the easy part. Intel reports there are 32 more targets on our list. All across Empire space, similar raids were happening. Human strike teams hitting supply depots, command stations, communication relays. Not enough to cripple the Empire, but enough to cause chaos and confusion. And with every raid, they left the same message: turn back. On the front lines, the Calvaxian armada was finally beginning to understand what they were facing. These weren't the simple defensive weapons of a primitive species. This was a military force that had been preparing for galactic war for generations. A species that understood strategy and tactics at a level most civilizations never needed to reach. After 3 days of fighting, Fleet Master Genvar sent a message to the Emperor. We've lost 60% of the armada. We've managed to occupy 3 border systems, but the humans evacuated them before we arrived. We're taking casualties faster than we can be. Reeves Tara walked through the Imperial archives, her footsteps echoing off ancient stone walls. The archives contained 50,000 years of Calvaxian history, records of every conquest, every species absorbed into the Empire. But today she wasn't looking at Calvaxian records. She was searching through everything the Empire had collected about humans. It wasn't much. Humanity was so young, so seemingly insignificant that most Imperial scholars had ignored them. But Vestara had a terrible feeling that this was a mistake that was costing the Empire dearly. She had spent 3 months reviewing human history, culture, and biology, and what she found terrified her. Scholar Vestara, a young assistant approached carrying a data tablet. I found the records you requested. Human military conflicts from their pre-space era. Vestara took the tablet and began reading. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through endless wars. The humans called them by names: World War I, World War II, the Chinese Civil War, the resource wars, the corporate conflicts. But to Vestara, they all looked the same. A species that couldn't stop fighting itself. They had nuclear weapons for 300 years and never used them to destroy themselves, she murmured. Most species either destroy themselves within decades of developing such weapons or abandon warfare altogether. But humans did neither. They developed rules for war, treaties, and then broke them when necessary. They learned restraint through survival. The assistant looked confused. How is that relevant to our current situation? Because it means the humans fighting us right now are showing restraint, Vestara said. They're following rules of engagement. But if we push them too far... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. She compiled her findings into a report and requested an immediate audience with Emperor Zhaltoth. 3 days later, she stood before the War Council once again. Speak, scholar, the Emperor said. His voice was tired. The war had been dragging on for 3 months, and despite committing thousands of ships, the Empire had made almost no progress. My Emperor, I have completed my analysis of human history and psychology. With your permission, I would like to present my findings. Zhaltoth gestured for her to continue. Vesitara activated a holographic display. An image of Earth appeared, rotating slowly. This is the human homeworld. They call it Earth. By galactic standards, it is a death world. Extreme weather, dangerous predators, diseases that kill millions. 98% of all species that evolved there went extinct. We know this already, Fleet Master Genvar said impatiently. What does it matter? It matters because it shaped who they became, Vestara replied. Humans didn't evolve to be the strongest or the fastest. They evolved to be persistent, to outlast their prey through sheer endurance, to survive through adaptation and intelligence. And when they developed civilization, they brought those same traits to warfare. She changed the display, showing human soldiers throughout history. For 10,000 years, humans have been perfecting the art of killing each other. They developed strategy, tactics, logistics, psychological warfare. They created weapons of terrible efficiency. And most importantly, they learned how to fight total war, the complete mobilization of every resource to destroy an enemy. Are you saying we should fear them? The Emperor asked. I'm saying we should understand them, Vestara corrected. The humans have been showing restraint. They evacuate their colonies before we arrive to avoid civilian casualties. They treat our prisoners well. They only strike military targets. But this restraint has limits. She pulled up another image showing human cities burning. This is what humans do when restraint ends. In their Second World War, they bombed entire cities into rubble. They killed millions, and they did it because they believed survival required it. If we push them to that point, if they decide the Empire is an existential threat, then they will escalate beyond anything we've seen so far. They're still just one species, Genvar argued. We have 10,000 worlds. Even if they're skilled warriors, they're outnumbered. Draketh, who had been sitting silently in the corner, finally spoke up. With respect, Fleet Master, you didn't see what I saw at Epsilon Eridani. Those weapons platforms didn't just destroy our fleet. They did it with calculated precision. Every shot was perfect. Every tactic was designed to maximize damage while minimizing their own losses. That kind of efficiency doesn't come from luck. It comes from centuries of experience. Before anyone could respond, an urgent message interrupted the council. The communication officer's face appeared on a display, looking pale. My Emperor, we have a situation. The human fleet has launched strikes against 7 of our core worlds simultaneously. They bypassed all our defenses and deployed weapons in orbit. Zhaltoth stood abruptly. What kind of weapons? We don't know yet, my Emperor. But they're broadcasting a message. Should I play it? Do it. The display changed to show Admiral Yamada. She looked older than before, tired. But her eyes were hard as steel. Emperor Zhaltoth, this message is for you personally. 3 months ago, you sent an armada to conquer human space. We warned you not to cross our border. You ignored that warning. We've shown you restraint, hoping you would come to your senses. But yesterday, your fleet used planet-killer weapons on 3 of our evacuated colonies. You destroyed worlds that humanity had spent centuries building. So now the rules change. Yamada paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was colder. We have placed devices in orbit of 7 Calvaxian core worlds. These devices are not bombs. They're much worse. They're designed to destabilize your sun's corona, triggering solar flares that will sterilize your planets. We're showing you these locations now. The display showed a list of worlds. Zhaltoth felt his blood run cold. One of them was the Calvaxian homeworld itself. You have 48 hours to withdraw all forces from Terran space, Yamada continued. If you comply, we'll remove the devices and seek peace negotiations. If you don't comply, we'll activate them. And before you think about trying to disable them, they're guarded by autonomous defense systems that will interpret any tampering as an attack. Try to remove them and they'll activate immediately. The message ended. For a long moment, there was complete silence in the council chamber. Then everyone started talking at once, their voices rising in panic and anger. Zhaltoth raised his hand, demanding silence. Is this possible? He asked Vestara. Can they really do this? Vestara checked her data tablet, her hands shaking. If they have the technology to manipulate stellar phenomena, yes, it's theoretically possible. And given what we've seen of their capabilities, I would not assume they're bluffing. This is terrorism, Genvar shouted. This is a war crime. We should what? Draketh interrupted. Call them criminals? We used planet killer weapons on their worlds first. We started this escalation, and now they've responded by threatening our most important systems, including our homeworld. They're showing us that they can reach any target they want, anytime they want. What would you have us do? Genvar demanded. Surrender to primitives? I would have us survive, Draketh replied quietly. The humans didn't evolve to conquer. They evolved to survive. And they've made it clear that they'll do anything to ensure their survival. Can we say the same? Zhaltoth sat down heavily in his throne. For 800 years, he had ruled the greatest empire in the galaxy. He had never lost a war, never been forced to negotiate from weakness. But now he was looking at a species that had somehow impossibly turned the tables. Scholar Vesitara, he said slowly. In your research, did you find any instance of humans backing down from a fight once they've committed to it? Vestara shook her head. No, my emperor. Once humans decide something is a matter of survival, they fight to the very end. They have a saying, death before dishonor. Another one is, give me liberty or give me death. They would rather die than submit. And you believe they would really activate those devices? Kill billions? I believe they would do it and feel terrible about it, Vestara said. But they would do it. Because in their minds, it's a choice between those billions and their own survival. And humans always choose survival. On Terran Command Station, Admiral Yamada sat in her office, staring at the countdown timer on her screen. 48 hours. That's how long she had given the Empire to respond. Around her, the entire Terran military was on high alert, waiting to see what would happen. Commander Park entered without knocking. Admiral, we're receiving protests from the Galactic Council. They're calling our actions war crimes. They're demanding we remove the solar disruption devices. Let them protest, Yamada said. The Council has been useless throughout this conflict. They won't commit forces to help us, but they're quick to criticize how we defend ourselves. Do you really think the Empire will withdraw? Park asked. Yamada was silent for a moment. I don't know, I hope so, because if they don't, we'll have to decide whether we're really willing to do what we threatened. Kill billions of civilians to save ourselves. Would you give the order, if it meant human survival? The neutral space station Unity 7 floated at the exact midpoint between Terran and Calvaxian space. It had been built specifically for these negotiations, a place where neither side held advantage. Admiral Keiko Yamada stood in the docking bay, watching as the Calvaxian shuttle approached. Are you ready for this? Commander Park asked beside her. Yamada adjusted her uniform. Ready or not, it has to happen. The war needs to end properly, not just pause. The Calvaxian delegation emerged from their shuttle. Yamada recognized Draketh immediately, the fleet commander who had survived Epsilon Eridani. Beside him walked an elderly Calvaxian female she didn't know, and behind them came a full security detail. Draketh approached and gave a formal bow. Admiral Yamada, I am Fleet Commander Draketh, and this is Scholar Vestara. We are authorized by Emperor Zhaltoth to negotiate terms of peace. Welcome to Unity 7. Yamada replied. I hope we can find a resolution that works for both our peoples. They moved to the conference room, a circular chamber with windows showing the stars. On one side sat the human delegation, on the other the Calvaxians. In the middle was a table with data displays and translation equipment. Vestara spoke first. Admiral Yamada, before we begin formal negotiations, I would like to understand something. Your species is young. You have fewer worlds, fewer ships, fewer resources than the Empire, and yet you fought us to a standstill. How? Yamada considered the question carefully. Scholar, humans have been preparing for this moment since we first learned other species existed. We knew that someday we would encounter a galactic power that would try to dominate us, so we made a choice. We invested heavily in military technology, in defensive systems, in training our people for war, not because we wanted war, but because we knew we might have no choice. You built an entire civilization around the expectation of conflict, Vestara said. Most species find peace after reaching the stars. Most species don't come from death worlds, Yamada replied. Most species didn't spend 10,000 years fighting for survival. We brought our history with us to the stars, all of it, the good and the bad. And when your empire demanded we submit, we did what humans have always done. We fought back, Draketh leaned forward. But you also showed restraint. You could have activated those solar disruption devices. You could have killed billions. Why didn't you? Because we're not monsters, Yamada said simply. Yes, humans are good at war, but we're also capable of mercy. We evacuated our colonies before you arrived to avoid civilian casualties. We treated your prisoners well. We warned you multiple times before escalating. We don't want to destroy the Empire. We just want to be left alone. The Emperor finds that hard to believe, Draketh said. No species has ever refused to join the Empire and then won a military conflict against us. He fears you have ambitions to replace us as the dominant galactic power. Yamada shook her head. We have no such ambitions. Look at our territory, 47 star systems. If we wanted to conquer, we would have expanded much faster, but we didn't. We built strong defenses and stayed within our borders. All we ask is that those borders be respected. Vestara pulled up a holographic display. I have prepared a proposal for peace terms. The Empire is willing to recognize Terran sovereignty over your current territory. In exchange, you must agree not to expand beyond your current borders without Imperial approval, and to share some of your military technology. No, Yamada said immediately. Absolutely not. We will not limit our expansion, and we certainly won't give you our weapons technology. But let me offer counterterms, Yamada interrupted. The Empire will recognize complete Terran sovereignty. We will establish a demilitarized zone along our border. Neither side will place military assets within 5 light years of the border. The Empire will pay reparations for the colonies you destroyed, and most importantly, the Empire will reform its vassalage system. Draketh's eyes widened. Reform our entire governmental structure? That's impossible, is it? Yamada pulled up her own display showing a list of species. These are 47 species currently under Imperial rule. According to our intelligence, 23 of them are planning rebellions. They've seen that the Empire can be challenged. They've seen that you can lose. If you don't reform, your Empire will tear itself apart from within. This is outrageous, Draketh started to say, but Vestara held up a hand. She's right, the scholar said quietly. I've seen the intelligence reports. Unrest is spreading throughout the Empire. Subject species are demanding the same treatment you gave humans, the right to refuse to maintain their independence. The Emperor knows this. It's why he authorized real negotiations instead of just preparing for another war. Then let's talk about real solutions, Yamada said. The Empire doesn't have to dissolve, but it needs to change. Offer your subject species a choice. Let them become partners instead of vassals. Share power instead of hoarding it. Build a galactic community instead of an empire. Draketh looked uncertain. The Emperor would never agree to this. Then the Emperor will watch his empire crumble, Yamada said flatly. Because humans aren't the only species willing to fight for freedom. We're just the first ones who won, but we won't be the last. The negotiations continued for 3 weeks. Every day brought new arguments, new compromises, new tensions. But slowly agreement began to form. The Empire would recognize Terran independence and establish the demilitarized zone. They would pay reparations, and they would begin a gradual reform process, giving subject species more autonomy. In exchange, humanity agreed not to actively support rebellions in Empire space, and to participate in a new galactic council with real power to mediate disputes. On the final day of negotiations, Yamada and Draketh stood alone in the observation lounge. Watching the stars, you changed everything, Draketh said quietly. The Empire will never be the same. Maybe that's a good thing, Yamada replied. Change can be painful, but it's necessary. The galaxy is big enough for many powers, many voices. It doesn't need one empire controlling everything. What will your people do now? Yamada smiled slightly. We'll rebuild. We lost 3 colonies and thousands of soldiers. Those need to be mourned and honored. And then we'll continue doing what humans do best, surviving and adapting. Maybe now we can focus on building instead of just defending. And if another threat appears, then we'll be ready, Yamada said simply. We're always ready. But hopefully word will spread. Maybe other species will think twice before trying to conquer us. Back on Earth, Corporal Diego Martinez stood in a cemetery, looking at a wall covered in names. Every soldier who had died defending the border was listed here. He found his squad's names and touched each one gently. We did it, he whispered. The border held. You didn't die for nothing. A young woman approached holding a small child. Are you Corporal Martinez? Yes, ma'am. My husband's name is on this wall. He served with you. She pointed to one of the names. I wanted to thank you for bringing him home, For making sure he didn't die in some nameless battle in space. Martinez felt tears in his eyes. He was a good soldier. A good friend. I'm sorry I couldn't save him. You saved all of us, the woman said. You and everyone who fought. My daughter will grow up free because of you. That matters more than you know. After she left, Martinez stood there for a long time thinking about the war, about everything they had lost and everything they had saved. War was terrible. But sometimes it was necessary. And humans, for all their faults, knew how to fight when they had to. On Terran Command Station, Admiral Yamada cleared out her office. She was retiring, having served her purpose. The war was over. The peace was holding. It was time for someone else to lead. Commander Park found her packing. Admiral, the Council has approved the peace treaty. It's official. The Calvaxian Empire has recognized our sovereignty. Good, Yamada said. What about the other species? The ones in Empire space? 3 species have already declared independence. The Empire isn't trying to stop them. Vestara's reforms are actually happening. It's slow, but it's real change. Yamada nodded. Then it was worth it. All of it. What will you do now? Rest, Yamada said with a tired smile. Maybe write a book. Try to remember who I was before I became a military commander. What about you? Someone has to keep monitoring the situation. Make sure the peace lasts. Make sure we're ready if it doesn't. Good, Yamada said. Humanity needs people like you. People who remember that peace is never permanent. It has to be maintained, protected, fought for if necessary. 1 year after the war ended, a memorial was erected at Epsilon Eridani, where the first battle had taken place. It was a simple monument made of black stone with a single inscription. Here humanity drew a line, and the line held. People from across human space came to visit the memorial. They brought flowers and photos of loved ones who had died in the war. They told stories of the battles, of the fear and the courage, and they reminded their children why the memorial existed. The galaxy had changed. The Calvaxian Empire was slowly transforming into something new, something closer to a confederation than a dictatorship. Other young species looked to humanity as proof that you didn't have to submit to ancient powers. That independence was possible if you were willing to fight for it.